They called her the Invisible Girl, the poor niece no one wanted to see. In the grandest manor of Somerset, Bethany Moore lived like a shadow among glittering lights, silent among laughter, unseen among the most desired women of England. But when the Duke of Wetherby returned after 6 years abroad, something impossible happened. He saw her. And what began in a lavender garden would become the scandal that no one could forget. Now let us enter Somerset, England, in the year 1892, where a love forbidden by society was about to bloom. In the vast county of Somerset, in the year 1892, the Blackwell Manor stood as a monument to wealth and privilege. Its stone walls rose against the English sky like a fortress of old money and older pride. Inside those walls, among silk curtains and crystal chandeliers, lived a young woman who might as well have been a ghost. Bethany Moore was 24 years old, and she had learned long ago that invisibility was safer than being seen. She was the niece of Lady Eleanor Blackwell, a widow whose temperament was as cold as the marble floors she walked upon. Though Bethany carried noble blood in her veins, she possessed neither dowry nor fortune, nor the kind of beauty that made men lose their senses at first glance. Her eyes were too thoughtful, her manner too quiet, her presence too easily overlooked. Lady Eleanor treated her as something between a servant and a charity case, a useful shadow. Someone to organize flowers for parties she would never truly attend, to pour tea for guests who would never remember her name, to sit silently in corners while the real ladies of society danced and laughed and schemed. The other women whispered about her at balls. Poor thing, no prospects, what a waste. Their voices carried across ballrooms like knives wrapped in velvet, cutting deeper because they pretended kindness. Bethany had learned not to flinch. Her only refuge was the garden behind the manor, a sprawling paradise of lavender that stretched toward the hills like a purple ocean frozen in time. Here, between the fragrant rows and beneath the open sky, she could breathe. Here, she was not invisible. The flowers knew her touch. The earth welcomed her hands. The bees hummed around her like old friends sharing secrets. She spent hours there when she could steal them, kneeling in the dirt with her skirts tucked around her, her hair falling loose from its pins, her hands deep in the soil. Lady Eleanor scolded her for it. A lady does not dirty her hands like a common gardener. But Bethany could not help herself. In the garden she felt alive in a way that no ballroom had ever made her feel. On this particular morning in late spring, the lavender was beginning to bloom. Bethany moved through the rows with careful steps, examining each plant with the attention of someone who actually cared whether things lived or died. She had planted many of these herself, seeds pressed into earth with her own fingers, watered with her own hands through the summer heat and autumn rain. They were hers in a way that nothing else in this world was hers. The sun was warm on her back. The breeze carried the scent of flowers and fresh-cut grass. For a moment, she allowed herself to close her eyes and simply exist in this space where no one judged her, where no one found her wanting, where no one wished she were somewhere else. That is when she heard the voices from the house. Lady Eleanor was shouting orders to the servants. There would be a gathering tonight, a reception. Someone important was coming. The house must be perfect. Everything must shine. Bethany sighed and brushed the dirt from her hands. She would be needed soon. There would be flowers to arrange, tables to set, 100 small tasks that no one would notice unless they were done wrong. She would move through the evening like she always did, silent, efficient, invisible. But as she walked back toward the manor, something made her pause at the edge of the garden. A strange feeling settled in her chest, not quite dread, not quite hope. Something unnamed that tasted like change. She looked back at the lavender field one last time before stepping into the shadow of the house. The flowers swayed in the breeze as if waving goodbye, as if they knew something she did not. Inside, Lady Eleanor was waiting with her usual expression of perpetual disappointment. "You are filthy," she said without greeting. "Go wash yourself. The Duke of Wetherby arrives this afternoon, and I will not have you looking like a field hand when he does. You will help prepare the reception, and you will stay out of sight once the guests arrive. Do you understand?" "Yes, Aunt." Bethany's voice was soft, practiced in submission. The Duke of Wetherby. She had heard the name before, of course. Everyone had. Matthew Ashford, one of the wealthiest men in England, returned at last from years abroad. The society pages had been full of speculation for weeks. Every unmarried woman in 3 counties was already sharpening her smile in preparation. But dukes did not notice girls like Bethany Moore. Men like that lived in a different world entirely, a world of titles and power and choices that common nieces could never dream of making. She went upstairs to wash the garden from her skin. But even as she scrubbed her hands clean, even as she pinned her hair back into its proper place, even as she transformed herself back into the invisible girl everyone expected her to be, that strange feeling remained. Change was coming. She could feel it in the air like the promise of a storm. And storms, she knew, did not ask permission before they arrived. The carriage arrived precisely at 4 o'clock, drawn by 4 black horses that moved with the kind of trained grace that spoke of old money and older bloodlines. The servants lined up in formation as they had been taught, backs straight, eyes down, hands folded. Even the house itself seemed to hold its breath. Matthew Ashford, Duke of Wetherby, stepped down from the carriage with the easy confidence of a man who had never questioned his place in the world. He was 31 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in traveling clothes that probably cost more than most families earned in a year. His dark hair was slightly disheveled from the journey, his jaw shadowed with stubble that would have looked unkempt on anyone else, but somehow made him appear more dangerous, more real. But it was his eyes that people noticed first. Grey-blue like storm clouds over water, holding depths that suggested he had seen things he would never speak about. They were the eyes of a man who had learned that beauty could be cruel and love could die, and coming home did not always mean finding peace. He had been gone for 6 years. 6 years since his young wife had died in childbirth during a brutal winter in Scotland, taking their unborn son with her into the dark. 6 years of traveling through Europe trying to outrun grief, trying to forget the sound of her last breath, trying to become someone who could survive the weight of that loss. He had not succeeded. He had simply learned to carry it better. Lady Eleanor greeted him with the kind of elaborate courtesy reserved for men of his rank and wealth. "Your Grace, what an honor. Welcome to Blackwell Manor. I trust your journey was pleasant." "As pleasant as any journey can be, Lady Eleanor." Matthew's voice was low and measured, the accent refined but not pretentious. He scanned the assembled servants with polite disinterest before his gaze returned to his hostess. "Your home is as beautiful as I remembered." "You flatter me, Your Grace. Please come inside. I have prepared rooms for you and your staff. Tonight we celebrate your return properly." As they moved toward the entrance, Matthew caught sight of a young woman disappearing around the corner of the house, arms full of cut flowers, her dress simpler than the elaborate gowns the other ladies wore. Something about the way she moved, quick and purposeful, as if she were trying very hard not to be noticed, caught his attention for half a heartbeat before Lady Eleanor reclaimed it with another round of practiced hospitality. Inside, the manor was everything one would expect. High ceilings decorated with elaborate molding, walls lined with paintings of stern ancestors, furniture that looked beautiful but felt uncomfortable, the kind of wealth that was meant to impress rather than welcome. Matthew moved through it with the numb familiarity of someone who had seen 100 houses just like it. The reception that evening was exactly what he had feared it would be. The drawing room was packed with the finest families of Somerset and beyond, women in expensive gowns that showed just enough to entice but not enough to scandalize, men with practiced smiles and calculated conversation, everyone performing the elaborate dance of social ambition with the precision of trained actors. And all of them were watching him. He could feel their eyes tracking his every movement, could hear the whispers disguised as polite conversation. The poor Duke. Lost his wife so young. Such a tragedy. But he is still young, still handsome, still rich, still available. Mothers pushed their daughters forward with subtle pressure. Widows laughed too loudly at things that were not funny. Even Lady Eleanor introduced him to at least a dozen eligible women in the first hour alone, each one more obviously available than the last. Matthew smiled politely, spoke when spoken to, danced when required. But inside he felt nothing except a familiar, hollow ache that had nothing to do with the people around him, and everything to do with the fact that none of this mattered anymore. He had married for love once, real love, the kind that made your chest hurt, and your hands shake and your whole world reorganize itself around another person. And then he had watched her die in a room that smelled like blood and desperation, her hand growing cold in his, while snow fell outside the window. Nothing in this glittering room could touch that kind of pain. Nothing these women offered could fill that kind of emptiness. He was making his way toward the terrace doors, desperate for air and solitude, when he saw her again. The girl from earlier. She was arranging fresh flowers in a vase near the wall, moving with quiet efficiency, clearly trying not to draw attention to herself. But Matthew was already watching. She wore a simple dress of pale blue, modest and well-made, but nothing compared to the elaborate silk surrounding her. Her hair was pinned up properly now, dark brown, shot through with lighter threads that caught the candlelight. She was not beautiful in the way that society defined beauty. Her features were too subtle for that. But there was something about her face, something about the way she focused completely on her task, as if the flowers actually mattered, that made him unable to look away. As if sensing his attention, she glanced up. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a moment, just a moment, something passed between them. Recognition without knowing, connection without understanding, the kind of instant awareness that defies logic but feels more real than anything else in the room. Then she looked down quickly, color rising in her cheeks, and hurried toward the door that led to the kitchens. "Your Grace." Lady Margaret Linton appeared at his elbow with the timing of a predator who had been watching for an opening. Her smile was sharp and beautiful, her gown cut to display her considerable assets, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "You look like a man in need of better company." Matthew turned to her with polite distance. "Do I, Lady Margaret?" "You do. This crowd can be so tedious, all these provincial people pretending they belong in the same room as a duke." Her laugh was practiced to sound natural. "Come, dance with me. Let me remind you what proper society looks like." He should have said yes, should have taken her hand and played the game expected of him. But instead, he found himself looking toward the door where the girl in the blue dress had disappeared. That strange feeling still humming in his chest, like a string that had been plucked and would not stop vibrating. "Perhaps later, Lady Margaret. I find I need some air." He left her standing there with surprise and annoyance flickering across her perfect face, and walked out into the night without looking back. The garden was dark and cool after the heat of the ballroom. The scent of lavender hung heavy in the air, sweet and clean and real in a way that nothing inside had been. Matthew breathed deeply, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders. He had come back to England because his advisors insisted he needed to remarry, to produce an heir, to fulfill his duty to the title. But standing here in the darkness, surrounded by flowers instead of expectations, he wondered if duty was enough reason to pretend his heart was still capable of feeling anything at all. That was when he heard it, the soft sound of someone crying. He turned toward the sound, moving quietly through the rows of lavender, and found her there, the girl from inside. She was kneeling in the dirt again, her careful hair falling loose, her shoulders shaking with silent tears she was trying desperately to contain. For a long moment he simply stood there, unsure whether to speak or retreat. But then she sensed his presence and looked up, her face streaked with tears that caught the moonlight. "Forgive me, Your Grace." Her voice was barely a whisper as she scrambled to stand, wiping frantically at her face. "I did not mean to disturb you. I will leave at once." But Matthew found himself stepping closer instead of letting her go, and in that moment, looking at this crying girl with dirt on her dress and flowers in her hands, he felt something he had not felt in 6 long years. He felt curious. "Please." Matthew's voice was gentle, surprising even himself. "Do not leave on my account." Bethany froze, caught between the instinct to obey a duke and the instinct to flee from anyone who might see her like this. Vulnerable, messy, real. She kept her eyes down, her hands twisting together in front of her stained dress. "I should not be out here, Your Grace. Lady Eleanor would be most displeased if she knew I had abandoned my duties. And yet here you are." He moved closer, careful not to startle her, drawn by something he could not name. "Among the lavender, crying as if your heart might break." She flinched at the observation but did not deny it. The moonlight cast silver across her face, illuminating tear tracks and the kind of sadness that went bone deep. Matthew found himself wanting to know what could hurt someone so much that they would risk punishment just to weep alone in a garden. "I find it difficult to breathe inside sometimes," she said finally, her voice so quiet he had to strain to hear it. "The flowers do not judge. They do not expect anything except care. It is easier here." He understood that better than she could know. "I came out here for the same reason." She looked up at him then, really looked, and he saw surprise flicker across her features. "You did? The ballroom is full of people who want something from me. A title, a fortune, a name for their daughters." He gestured back toward the house where music and laughter spilled from the windows. "They perform their interest so perfectly, I almost believe them sometimes. But then I remember that none of them would look twice at me if I were not a duke." Bethany studied him for a long moment, and Matthew had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen for the first time in years, not as a title or a fortune or a tragic widower, just as a man standing in a garden, as lost as she was. "That must be very lonely," she said softly. "It is." The admission came easier than it should have. He gestured toward the ground where she had been kneeling. "What about you? Why are you out here crying instead of dancing inside?" A bitter smile touched her lips. "I am not invited to dance, Your Grace. I am Lady Eleanor's niece, but I have no dowry, no fortune, no prospects. I am useful for arranging flowers and pouring tea. That is all." "That seems a waste." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My aunt would disagree. She is already arranging my future. There is a gentleman, if one can call him that, old enough to be my grandfather, wealthy, widowed 3 times. He is looking for a young wife to care for him in his final years and produce an heir if possible. Lady Eleanor believes it is the best I can hope for." Matthew felt anger rise in his chest, hot and unexpected. "And what do you believe?" "I believe I have no choice." Her voice broke slightly. "I have nowhere else to go, no money of my own, no family except her. If I refuse, I will be cast out with nothing. So I will marry him and I will smile, and I will pretend that being sold like livestock is somehow an honor, because at least I will have a roof over my head." The bitterness in her words matched the weight in his own chest. Different circumstances, perhaps, but the same fundamental cage. Society expected things from both of them, demanded sacrifices, treated them like pieces on a board to be moved at someone else's convenience. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated, as if even that small piece of herself was something she had to guard carefully. "Bethany Moore." "Bethany." He let the name settle between them. "Do you love these flowers?" "More than anything." Her face transformed when she looked at the lavender surrounding them, softening with genuine affection. "I planted many of them myself. Lady Eleanor thinks it is beneath me, but I cannot help it. When I am here, touching the earth, helping things grow, I feel like I matter. Like I am doing something good in a world that seems determined to make me feel worthless." Matthew knelt beside her then, ignoring the expensive fabric of his trousers as they touched the damp ground. He reached out and brushed his fingers across the nearest lavender stem, feeling the delicate texture, breathing in the clean scent. "My wife loved flowers," he said quietly. "She had gardens at our estate in Scotland. Roses mostly. She said they were like people, beautiful but difficult, requiring constant care, capable of drawing blood if you were not careful. She died before she could see them bloom again. I am sorry." Bethany's voice was thick with compassion. "That must have been unbearable." "It was. It still is." He looked at her, this strange girl with dirt on her hands and honesty in her eyes. "I came back to England because I was told I must remarry, must produce an heir, must fulfill my duty to the title. But standing in that ballroom tonight, looking at all those eager faces, I felt nothing. Not interest, not desire, not even basic curiosity, just emptiness, until I saw you." Bethany's breath caught. She stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "Your Grace, I do not understand, neither do I." Matthew smiled slightly, the first real smile he had managed in longer than he could remember. "But when I saw you with these flowers, crying as if the world had broken you, I felt something. Not emptiness. Something else. Something I thought had died with my wife." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched one of the lavender stems she still held in her trembling hand. Their fingers brushed, barely, but the contact sent a shock through both of them that had nothing to do with cold and everything to do with recognition. "Tell me about the flowers," he said softly. "Teach me what you love about them." Bethany looked down at their almost touching hands, then back up at his face. In the moonlight, his eyes were more blue than gray, intense and focused entirely on her, as if she were the only person in the world worth paying attention to. It was terrifying and thrilling and completely impossible, but she found herself speaking anyway. "Lavender is ancient," she began, her voice gaining strength as she spoke about something she actually understood. "The Romans used it in their baths. The name comes from the Latin word for washing. It symbolizes devotion, purity, silence. In the language of flowers, it means, 'I will wait for you.'" Her voice caught on those last words, suddenly aware of how they sounded in this moment, with this man, under this moon. "I will wait for you," Matthew repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of each word. "That is beautiful. Sad, perhaps, but beautiful. Most beautiful things are sad, Your Grace." Bethany pulled her hand back gently, though she could still feel the ghost of his touch on her skin. "That is what makes them valuable. They do not last forever." He stood then, brushing dirt from his knees, and extended his hand to help her up. She hesitated only a moment before taking it, letting him pull her to her feet. Even after she was standing, he did not immediately release her hand. "I should like to come back here tomorrow if you will permit it, to learn more about the flowers, about what makes them grow." The words were simple, but they both understood he was asking for something more. Permission to see her again, to speak with her again, to continue this strange, impossible conversation that should never have started in the first place. Bethany knew she should refuse, knew that nothing good could come from a duke paying attention to a girl with no name and no future. But when she looked into his eyes and saw genuine interest there, genuine curiosity, genuine connection, she found herself nodding before she could stop herself. "I am usually here in the mornings, Your Grace, before the house wakes fully. The garden is quiet then. Then I will be here too." He squeezed her hand once before letting go, the gesture both a promise and a goodbye. "Good night, Bethany Moore." "Good night, Your Grace." She watched him walk back toward the house, his tall figure disappearing into the shadows. Only when he was completely gone did she allow herself to sink back down among the lavender, her heart racing, her hand still tingling where he had touched it. This was dangerous, she knew that. Dukes did not have romantic conversations with poor nieces in moonlit gardens. Men like him did not look at girls like her with interest in their eyes. This could only end badly. But for the first time in as long as she could remember, Bethany felt something other than resigned despair about her future. She felt hope, and hope, she was learning, was the most dangerous feeling of all. Inside the manor, Matthew made his way back to the ballroom, his mind still in the garden with a girl who smelled like lavender and spoke about flowers as if they were the only things in the world worth understanding. The party was winding down, guests beginning to make their departures, Lady Eleanor holding court near the entrance. She caught sight of him immediately, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly as she took in his disheveled appearance, the dirt on his trousers, the distracted expression on his face. "Your Grace, I trust you enjoyed the evening air." "Very much, Lady Eleanor." Matthew kept his voice neutral, polite. "Your gardens are exceptional." "Yes, well." She sniffed slightly. "My niece tends them. The girl has a peculiar obsession with getting her hands dirty. I try to discourage it, but she is stubborn. Your niece." Matthew kept his tone casual, though his heart had begun to beat faster. "The young woman I saw earlier." "Bethany." Lady Eleanor's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, my late sister's daughter. A burden, I am afraid, though I do my duty by her. She has no prospects, no fortune. I am arranging a suitable marriage for her with a gentleman of means. It is the best she can hope for given her circumstances." Matthew said nothing, but something cold and angry settled in his chest at the casual cruelty in her words. This woman spoke of Bethany as if she were a problem to be solved rather than a person to be cared for. "I see," he said finally. "You are very generous." Lady Eleanor preened slightly, missing the edge in his voice. "I do what I must, Your Grace. Family is family, even when they are disappointing." After she moved away to say goodbye to other guests, Matthew stood alone in the ballroom that suddenly felt even more suffocating than before. Around him, the last remnants of the party swirled and laughed and performed their elaborate social dance, but all he could think about was a girl in a garden who loved flowers and spoke honestly about sadness and made him feel, for the first time in 6 years, like maybe his heart was not completely dead after all. Tomorrow he would return to the lavender garden, and tomorrow everything would begin to change. The morning came wrapped in mist that rolled across the lavender fields. Bethany woke before dawn, her heart racing. He would not come. Dukes did not keep promises made in moonlit gardens to girls who meant nothing, but even as she told herself this, she found herself choosing the pale green dress that made her eyes brighter, pinning her hair with care. Her hands trembled as she slipped out to the garden. The sun painted the eastern sky gold and pink. Bethany moved through the lavender rows, checking each plant, but her attention kept drifting toward the manor path. "Good morning, Bethany Moore." She spun around, nearly dropping her basket. Matthew stood at the garden edge, dressed simply in dark trousers and a white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows. No formal coat, no cravat. Just a man who looked like he had been waiting for dawn the same way she had. "Your Grace." She managed a curtsy despite her shaking knees. "I am told I move quietly." He smiled, and something in her chest twisted at how young and vulnerable he looked. "May I help with your work?" "Your Grace, you are a duke. You do not need to do manual labor. Perhaps I do not need to. But I would like to. If you will teach me." He moved closer, eyes intense. "I find I am very interested in learning what you can teach me." Heat rose in her cheeks. She led him deeper into the garden, hyper-aware of him beside her, so close their arms almost brushed. "The soil needs to be kept moist but not wet. You must pay attention. Learn to read what the plants need." She knelt beside a row and he knelt with her, shoulder touching hers. "See how these leaves are gray. They are thirsty, but these darker ones are content." Matthew touched the leaves carefully. "Like this?" "Yes." Her voice softened. "You have gentle hands. I try to be gentle with beautiful things." They stared at each other, the scent of lavender surrounding them like a cocoon, holding nothing but this impossible connection growing between them. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Not what society cares about. Tell me what matters to you." No one had ever asked her that before. "I want to matter. I want my life to mean something, even if it is just making a garden grow. I want to know I did something good. Something real. That is everything. What about you, Your Grace? What do you want?" Matthew was quiet, fingers moving gently across the stems. "I want to feel alive again. I spent 6 years trying to outrun grief, but none of it touched me. I was a ghost. Then last night I met you, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I felt something real." His honesty was devastating. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of feeling things I have no right to feel. You are a duke. I am no one. This cannot end well." Matthew caught her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. His palm was warm, his grip gentle. "Perhaps it cannot end well, but does that mean we should not begin at all?" He lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, lips warm against her skin. "I'm tired of living in fear. If all I can have is this moment with you in this garden, then I want this moment. Fully. Without reservation. Your Grace." "Matthew. When we are alone like this." "Call me Matthew." "I cannot. It would not be proper." "Nothing about this is proper, Bethany." He moved closer, his free hand brushing a strand of hair from her face, fingers tracing her jaw with heartbreaking tenderness. "But I do not care about proper anymore. I only care about real. And you are the most real thing I have felt in 6 years." She should pull away, should protect her heart. But his hand was warm against her face, and his eyes looked at her like she was something precious. "Matthew," she breathed, testing the name, feeling how dangerous and perfect it sounded. "Yes, just like that." He leaned closer, breath on her lips, flecks of darker blue visible in his grey eyes. "Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me you do not want this, and I will walk away. But if there is even the smallest chance that you feel what I feel, then please, do not send me away. I feel it." The admission was barely a whisper, but it changed everything. "I want it. I want you. Even though I know I should not. Even though this is dangerous and will probably destroy me." His exhale was shaky with relief. "Then let us have this. Whatever time we can steal, whatever moments we can claim, let it be ours alone." She nodded, unable to speak. Matthew's smile was brilliant and broken, and when he pressed his forehead to hers, Bethany felt her entire world shift. They stayed like that, breathing each other's air, holding hands, existing in a bubble where dukes and poor nieces did not matter, where only this connection was real. The sun rose higher, burning away mist, painting the field purple and gold. Soon servants would wake. Soon they would have to return to their proper roles and pretend this never happened. But now, kneeling in the dirt with hands intertwined and hearts beating in tandem, Matthew and Bethany simply existed. Two lonely souls who found each other against all odds. Two people choosing to feel everything, even though they knew it would hurt. Because sometimes the risk of pain was worth the chance of something real. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke about what had just happened. There were no words adequate to contain it. "Tomorrow," he said simply. "Tomorrow," she agreed. He walked away without looking back. Bethany returned to her work with trembling hands and a heart too big for her chest. The lavender swayed in the breeze, keeping their secrets, bearing witness to the beginning of something that should never have begun, but felt more inevitable than breathing. In the house, Lady Eleanor was already awake and irritated. She had seen the Duke walking from the gardens with dirt on his clothes and a strange expression. She had seen Bethany enter through the kitchen with flushed cheeks and bright eyes. Something was happening, something she did not understand and could not control. Lady Eleanor did not like things she could not control. She would watch them more carefully, would ensure her useless niece did not ruin the chance to secure an alliance with whatever wealthy woman the Duke eventually chose. For now, she simply made note of it. A small concern, nothing more. She had no idea she was watching the spark that would soon become a wildfire, one that would burn through everything she had carefully built and leave nothing but ashes in its wake. The days that followed became a secret rhythm known only to two hearts beating in tandem. Every morning before dawn, Matthew would slip from the manor and find Bethany already waiting among the lavender. They would work side by side, their conversations growing deeper, their silences more comfortable, their touches more frequent and lingering. He learned the way she bit her lip when concentrating. She learned the sound of his laugh when he forgot to be the grieving Duke. They shared stories and dreams and fears, building something fragile and precious in the stolen hours before the world woke up to judge them. But secrets, no matter how carefully kept, have a way of drawing attention from those who thrive on knowing what others wish to hide. Lady Margaret Linton had not forgotten the way the Duke had dismissed her at the reception, had not forgiven the way his eyes had followed that plain, poor girl instead of resting on her own considerable charms. She was a woman who had spent her entire life learning to read the subtle language of desire and ambition, and she recognized both when she saw Matthew Ashford looking at Bethany Moore. It was an insult, an impossibility, a threat to everything Margaret had planned. She had returned to Blackwell Manor under the pretense of visiting Lady Eleanor, but her real purpose was far more calculating. She needed to understand what hold this nobody had over a duke. And more importantly, she needed to break it. On the fifth morning, Margaret rose before dawn and positioned herself at a window overlooking the gardens. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky when she saw him. The Duke of Wetherby, dressed like a common labourer, walking purposefully toward the lavender fields. And there, already waiting like some peasant maiden in a fairy tale, was Bethany Moore. Margaret watched them meet, watched the way his whole body seemed to relax when he saw her, watched them kneel together in the dirt, hands touching as they worked, heads bent close in conversation that looked far too intimate for propriety. Her blood turned to ice and fire all at once. This was worse than she had imagined. This was not simple attraction. This was connection. The kind that made men forget their duty and women forget their place. The kind that destroyed carefully laid plans and ruined reputations. The kind that had to be stopped. Margaret waited until they parted, until the Duke returned to the manor and Bethany disappeared into the kitchen. Then she made her way downstairs, her mind already spinning with possibilities. She found Lady Eleanor in the morning room, reviewing household accounts with her usual sour expression. "My dear Eleanor," Margaret's voice was silk and sympathy, "I wonder if I might speak with you about a delicate matter." Lady Eleanor looked up, immediately alert to the tone of conspiracy. "Of course, Margaret. Please sit." Margaret settled herself gracefully, arranging her skirts with practiced precision. "I have observed something during my stay here that troubles me greatly. Something that affects both your family's reputation and the Duke's honor." Lady Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Go on. Your niece. The one who tends the gardens. I have seen her meeting privately with the Duke of Wetherby, every morning, alone, in circumstances that could only be described as compromising." The words hung in the air like poison. Lady Eleanor's face went through several expressions at once. Shock, fury, calculation. That ungrateful little wretch. After everything I have done for her, how dare she reach above her station? How dare she jeopardize my standing with the Duke? I thought you should know. Margaret's voice was gentle, understanding, completely false. Before the situation becomes public knowledge, before real damage is done, what has she done? Has she seduced him? Trapped him somehow? Margaret chose her words carefully, mixing truth with insinuation. They spend hours together, speaking intimately, touching. I cannot say what has transpired between them, but the appearance alone is damning. If word spreads that the Duke has been dallying with a penniless nobody, his reputation will suffer. And yours as well, for harboring such a scheming girl under your roof. Lady Eleanor stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. "I will not tolerate this. I have already arranged her marriage to Mr. Withers. The contracts are nearly complete. If she has ruined herself with the Duke, Withers will never take her. I will be left with her forever, a burden and a scandal." "Perhaps," Margaret said softly, "you should accelerate the marriage, before things progress any further, before the Duke develops feelings that might complicate matters." "Yes." Lady Eleanor's voice was sharp with decision. "Yes, that is exactly what I will do. The wedding will happen within the week. I will send word to Withers today. And as for my niece, she will be confined to the house until the ceremony. No more gardens, no more freedom, no more opportunities to destroy everything I have built." Margaret smiled, satisfied. "You are wise, Eleanor, truly wise. And if I may offer one more piece of advice, anything. Tell the Duke that your niece has been called away, family emergency, something that requires her immediate departure. Let him believe she left willingly. It will be kinder than the truth, and it will save his pride." Lady Eleanor considered this, then nodded slowly. "Yes, that will work. He will forget her soon enough. There are plenty of appropriate women eager for his attention. This foolish infatuation will fade like a summer cold." After Margaret left, Lady Eleanor sat alone in the morning room, her mind churning with anger and wounded pride. She had taken in her sister's orphan daughter out of duty, had fed and clothed her, had tolerated her strange obsession with dirt and flowers, and this was how she was repaid. With scandal, with betrayal, with the kind of ambition that could destroy them all. Well, no more. She rang for a servant and began issuing orders. "Find Miss Moore. Tell her she's to come to my study immediately, and send word to the stables. I need a messenger to ride to Mr. Withers' estate today." The trap was closing, and Bethany, still in the kitchen washing dirt from her hands and replaying every word Matthew had spoken that morning, had no idea that her fragile happiness was already being torn apart by forces she could not see or fight. Upstairs, Margaret stood at her window and smiled. She had planted the seeds of destruction perfectly. Now she simply had to wait for them to grow. The Duke would be angry at first, of course, would demand to know where Bethany had gone. But Margaret would be there to comfort him, to remind him of his duty, to help him see that what he felt for that girl was nothing more than temporary madness brought on by grief and loneliness. And when he finally came to his senses, when he finally remembered what he needed in a wife, Margaret would be ready. beautiful, appropriate, worthy of a duke. She had won. She just had to wait for everyone else to realize it. But what Margaret did not know, what she could not have predicted, was that Matthew Ashford was not a man who forgot easily, and he was not a man who let go of something real just because society deemed it inappropriate. The storm she had started was going to be far more destructive than she imagined, and when it finally broke, no one would be left untouched by its fury. The summons came just as Bethany was preparing to wash and change for the day. A sharp knock on her door, a servant's anxious face, and the words that made her stomach drop. "Lady Eleanor wants you in her study." Now, Bethany's hands went cold. She knew that tone, had heard it before when her aunt was most displeased. She smoothed her dress, still stained with morning dirt, and made her way downstairs with dread pooling in her chest. Lady Eleanor stood by the window, her back rigid with fury barely contained. She did not turn when Bethany entered. "Aunt Eleanor, I came as quickly as I could. Close the door." Bethany obeyed, her heart hammering. When Lady Eleanor finally turned, her face was a mask of cold rage. "How dare you? How dare you throw yourself at the Duke of Wetherby like some common trollop seeking to raise her station?" Bethany felt the blood drain from her face. "I have not thrown myself at anyone, Aunt. I have only been tending the gardens as I always do. Do not lie to me. You have been meeting him in secret, alone, unchaperoned, behaving in a manner that could destroy both your reputation and mine." There was no point in denying it. Bethany lifted her chin, finding courage she did not know she possessed. "We have spoken, yes, but there has been nothing improper. He has been kind to me, that is all kind." Lady Eleanor laughed, harsh and bitter. "Men like that are not kind without expecting something in return. And girls like you should know better than to mistake attention from a duke as anything other than temporary amusement." The words hit like physical blows, but Bethany stood her ground. "He is not like that. You do not know him as I do, and you will not know him at all after today." Lady Eleanor moved to her desk and picked up a letter, sealed with wax. "I have sent word to Mr. Withers. The wedding will take place in 4 days. You will remain in this house until then. No gardens, no walks. No opportunities to embarrass this family further. 4 days. The words echoed in Bethany's mind like a death sentence. "Aunt Eleanor, please, I cannot marry him. He is old enough to be my grandfather. He does not love me." "Love?" Lady Eleanor spat the word like a curse. "Love is a luxury for people with choices. You have no choices. You have no money, no prospects, no future except what I provide. You will marry Mr. Withers, and you will be grateful for it." "And what of the Duke?" Bethany's voice broke despite her efforts to stay strong. "What will you tell him?" "I will tell him you have been called away. Family matters. He will forget you within a week, as all men forget diversions that were never meant to last." Bethany wanted to argue, wanted to say that what she and Matthew had was real, was more than a diversion, was worth fighting for. But looking at her aunt's implacable face, she realized the futility of it all. She had no power here, no rights, no voice that anyone would hear. "You are dismissed. Go to your room. A servant will bring your meals. You will not leave until the wedding day." Bethany left the study with her world crumbling around her. She climbed the stairs on numb legs, entered her room, and heard the key turn in the lock behind her. She was a prisoner, and Matthew would think she had abandoned him. 3 days passed in agony. Bethany spent her time at the window, staring at the lavender fields below, wondering if he was there looking for her, wondering if he thought she had fled, wondering if he cared at all. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. A visiting painter, commissioned to create portraits for the upcoming summer ball, asked Lady Eleanor if he might paint one of the younger ladies of the house in the garden setting. It would add, he said, a touch of natural beauty to the formal proceedings. Lady Eleanor, eager to impress with her hospitality and perhaps prove that her niece was appropriately occupied, agreed. She had Bethany dressed in a simple white gown and escorted to the lavender fields under strict supervision. The painter worked quickly, capturing Bethany among the purple flowers she loved, the afternoon sun painting gold in her hair, her expression distant and melancholy in a way that made the portrait achingly beautiful. She did not know that Matthew had returned early from a ride and was watching from the terrace, did not know that seeing her there surrounded by their shared sanctuary, but with sadness in every line of her body, broke something in him that had been barely holding together. Did not know that he was about to do something that would change everything. That evening, the portrait was displayed in the main gallery alongside others. The summer ball was in full preparation, the house filled with guests and music, and the elaborate performance of high society. Matthew moved through it all like a man in a dream, his eyes constantly drawn to that portrait, to the girl in the lavender who had taught him to feel alive again. Lady Margaret found him there, staring at the painting with an expression she could not quite read. "It is a lovely portrait, Your Grace, though perhaps the subject is a bit plain for such romantic treatment." Matthew turned to her slowly, and something in his eyes made her step back involuntarily. "I find her the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." The words carried across the crowded room, cutting through conversation like a blade through silk. Heads turned, whispers started. Lady Eleanor appeared at Matthew's elbow, her smile strained. "Your Grace, perhaps we should discuss this privately." But Matthew was beyond propriety now, beyond caring what society thought or expected. He had spent 3 days believing Bethany had left him, 3 days of hollow aching that reminded him too much of grief, 3 days realizing that what he felt for her was not temporary or frivolous or something he could walk away from. "Where is she?" His voice was quiet, but it carried authority that made even Lady Eleanor hesitate. "Where is Bethany?" "She has been occupied with preparations, Your Grace. Family matters. Do not lie to me." Matthew's tone hardened. "I have servants too. I have eyes. I know she has been locked in her room for 4 days. I know you are forcing her to marry a man 3 times her age. And I know that if I do not act now, I will lose the only real thing I have found in 6 years." The ballroom had gone completely silent. Every eye was on them now. The scandal they had all been hoping for was unfolding in real time. Lady Margaret tried one last time. "Your Grace, surely you cannot mean to concern yourself with a girl of no consequence. A girl with no fortune or family worth noting." Matthew finally looked at her, and his smile was cold enough to freeze. "I find that the things society considers consequential are usually the things worth ignoring, and the things society overlooks are usually the only things worth fighting for." He turned back to Lady Eleanor. "I will see Bethany, now, or I will leave this house and take my patronage, my influence, and my friendship with me. Choose quickly." Lady Eleanor's face had gone white with rage and humiliation, but she was not a fool. Offending a duke publicly was social suicide, and while she hated to admit defeat, she valued her position more than her pride. "She will be brought down." "Good." And Matthew's voice dropped to a tone that promised consequences. "If I find she has been mistreated in any way, you will answer for it." A servant was dispatched. The ballroom remained frozen in anticipation. And Matthew stood before Bethany's portrait, his heart pounding, knowing he was about to see her again. Knowing he was about to claim her in front of everyone who had ever doubted that love could matter more than status. Knowing he was about to start a scandal that would echo through every drawing room in England, and not caring in the slightest. Bethany was brought down the servants' stairs, still wearing the simple white gown from the portrait sitting, her hair hastily pinned, but strands falling loose around her face. She had no idea what was happening. No idea why she was being summoned in the middle of a ball she had not been invited to attend. When she entered the ballroom and saw Matthew standing there, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath, she froze. The entire room was watching them. Every guest, every servant, everyone. Matthew crossed the distance between them in long strides, ignoring propriety, ignoring scandal, ignoring everything except the need to reach her. Bethany. Her name on his lips was relief and accusation and question all at once. "Your Grace." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I thought you had forgotten me." Something in his expression cracked at those words. "Forgotten you. I have thought of nothing else for 4 days. I went to the garden every morning. You were not there. I asked after you and was told you had left. That you had chosen to go, I did not choose." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I was locked away. Told I would marry Mr. Withers in 4 days. Told you would forget me and I should be grateful for what little I could have. Matthew's jaw tightened with fury, but when he spoke, his voice was gentle. I could never forget you, not in 4 days, not in 4 years, not if I lived to be 100 years old. Around them, gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was more than scandal now, this was a declaration. Lady Eleanor pushed forward, her face a mask of forced civility. Your Grace, perhaps this conversation would be better held in private. No, Matthew did not look away from Bethany. This needs to be said publicly. So there can be no misunderstanding. So there can be no more lies or manipulation. He took Bethany's hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. I came back to England because I was told I had to remarry, had to produce an heir, had to fulfill my duty. I thought my heart had died with my wife, thought I would never feel anything real again. He paused, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. Then I met you in a garden full of lavender, and you taught me that hearts do not die. They simply wait for the right person to wake them up again. Matthew, please. Bethany's eyes filled with tears. You do not have to do this. You do not have to ruin yourself for me. Ruin myself. He smiled, sad and beautiful. Bethany, marrying someone I do not love, spending my life pretending to feel something I do not feel, that would be ruin. Choosing you, choosing real, choosing love, that is salvation. But before he could say more, Lady Margaret's voice cut through the moment like a knife. How touching! Her tone dripped with false sympathy as she moved forward, something clutched in her hand. But perhaps the Duke should know the truth about the girl he is so eager to defend. Perhaps he should see what she truly thinks of him. She held up a letter, sealed and addressed. Matthew recognized Bethany's handwriting on the envelope. What is that? His voice had gone dangerously quiet. A letter your sweet Bethany wrote to you. Margaret's smile was triumphant, intercepted before it could reach you, thankfully. Would you like to know what it says? How she begs you to save her from her arranged marriage. How she promises you anything you want, if you will only provide for her. How she calculates exactly what marrying a duke would mean for someone of her station. No. Bethany's voice was sharp with horror. That is not what I wrote, I never. But Margaret was already reading, her voice clear and carrying. My dearest Matthew, I find myself in desperate circumstances. Lady Eleanor has arranged my marriage to a man I cannot bear. I know I should not ask this of you, but I have no one else to turn to. If you could provide me with the means to escape, I would be forever in your debt. I would give you anything you asked, anything at all. I know the value of an alliance with a duke. I know what it could mean for someone like me. Please save me from this fate. Yours in desperation, Bethany. The words hung in the air like poison. Matthew's face had gone completely blank, unreadable. Bethany felt the world tilt beneath her feet. That is not what I wrote. She turned to Matthew, desperate for him to believe her. I wrote that I loved you, that I wished things were different, that I would cherish every moment we had, even if we could never have more. I never asked you for anything. I never calculated. I never. Her voice broke on the last word. Matthew stared at the letter in Margaret's hand, then at Bethany's tear-streaked face. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched, terrible and suffocating. Then he spoke, his voice cold in a way that made Bethany's blood freeze. I thought you were different. I thought what we had was real, but perhaps I was a fool. Perhaps grief made me see something that was never there. Matthew, no, please. Bethany reached for him, but he stepped back, the movement a rejection that cut deeper than any words. I need air. He turned and walked toward the terrace doors, his shoulders rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Lady Eleanor looked vindicated, Lady Margaret looked triumphant, and Bethany stood frozen in the center of it all, her heart shattering into pieces too small to ever put back together. She had lost him, lost everything. And the worst part was that he thought she had used him, thought she was no better than all the other women who saw him as a title instead of a man. She wanted to scream, to rage, to make someone, anyone, believe the truth. But what was the point? Who would listen to her? Who would believe a penniless nobody over a marquis holding physical evidence of betrayal? Bethany turned and fled, pushing through the crowd, ignoring Lady Eleanor's commands to return, running blindly through corridors until she found herself outside in the lavender garden. Their garden, the place where everything had begun. She collapsed among the flowers, her white gown spreading around her like a ghost, her sobs tearing through the night air. Above her, the moon watched with indifferent light. Around her, the lavender swayed, unable to comfort or protect or change what had been broken. Inside the manor, an old butler named Bradford had watched the entire scene unfold with growing concern. He had served the Blackwell family for 40 years, had seen Lady Eleanor's cruelty up close, had watched Bethany grow from a child into a woman who deserved far better than what she received, and he had seen Lady Margaret bribe a housemaid 3 days ago, had watched the exchange of coins for something small and white, a letter perhaps. Bradford was old, he was tired, but he was not without conscience. He made his way to his quarters, retrieved something from his locked drawer, and went in search of the Duke. Some truths, he knew, were worth risking everything to tell, even if it meant defying his employer, even if it meant losing his position. Some truths mattered more than safety. And the truth about that letter was one of them. Matthew stood on the terrace, hands gripping the stone railing so hard his knuckles had gone white. The night air was cool against his face, but did nothing to calm the storm raging inside him. He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe her. But the evidence was there in black and white, her handwriting, her signature. Words that sounded exactly like what every other ambitious woman in England would say to trap a duke. Perhaps he had been a fool. Perhaps grief had made him vulnerable. Perhaps what he thought was real had only been desperation wearing the mask of love. Your Grace. Matthew turned to find an elderly butler standing in the doorway, something clutched in his weathered hands. The man looked nervous, but determined. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace. My name is Bradford. I have served this household for 40 years, and there is something you need to know before you make a decision you will regret for the rest of your life. Matthew's attention sharpened. Speak. Bradford stepped forward, holding out a folded piece of paper. This is the real letter Miss Bethany wrote to you, the one that was intercepted before it could reach your hands. Lady Margaret paid a housemaid to steal it. Then she forged the one she read tonight in the ballroom. Matthew took the letter with hands that had begun to shake. He recognized Bethany's handwriting immediately, the same careful script, but the words were completely different. My dearest Matthew, he read silently, his heart beginning to pound. I know I should not write this. I know nothing can come of what we feel. But I cannot let another day pass without telling you the truth. I love you, not your title, not your wealth, not what you could give me. I love the man who kneels in the dirt beside me and speaks honestly about grief, the man who looks at flowers as if they matter, the man who made me feel seen for the first time in my life. I know we can have no future. I know society will never allow it, but I will carry these stolen mornings in my heart forever. Whatever happens, know that you gave me something precious. You gave me hope. Yours always, Bethany. Matthew's vision blurred. His chest felt like it was being crushed. He looked up at Bradford, barely able to speak past the emotion choking him. Why would Lady Margaret do this? Because she wants you for herself, Your Grace. She saw Miss Bethany as a threat. She has been planning this from the moment she realized you cared for the girl. The old butler's voice was steady despite the risk he was taking. I have the housemaid's testimony if you require it. She feels guilty for her part. She will swear to what happened. Matthew looked down at the real letter again, reading it twice more, feeling each word settle into his bones like truth finally coming home. He had been so ready to believe the worst, so quick to assume betrayal. Because deep down, some part of him still could not accept that someone could love him for himself, could not believe that happiness was something he was allowed to have again. But Bethany had never asked him for anything, had never calculated, had never treated him like a prize to be won. She had simply loved him, honestly, completely, without expectation or demand, and he had turned his back on her. Where is she? Matthew's voice was rough with urgency. In the garden, Your Grace. She ran there after you left. She has been there ever since. Matthew did not wait to hear more. He moved through the manor like a man possessed, ignoring the remaining guests, ignoring Lady Eleanor's attempts to speak with him, ignoring everything except the desperate need to reach Bethany before it was too late. He found her among the lavender, collapsed on the ground in her white gown, her hair falling loose around her shoulders, her body shaking with silent sobs. The moonlight painted her silver and shadow, making her look like something from a dream or a tragedy. Matthew's heart broke completely at the sight. Bethany. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. When she saw him, something flickered across her features. Hope, fear, pain too deep for words. "Please go." Her voice was hoarse from crying. "I cannot bear to see disappointment in your eyes again. I cannot survive you looking at me like I am something shameful." Matthew knelt beside her in the dirt, just as he had that first morning when everything began. He reached into his coat and pulled out the real letter, holding it between them. "This is what you wrote. This is the truth." He watched her eyes widen as she recognized it. "Lady Margaret stole it, forged another. Bradford brought me the real one and told me everything." Bethany stared at the letter, then at Matthew, as if she could not quite believe what she was hearing. "You believe me. I should have believed you from the start." His voice cracked with remorse. "I should have trusted what I knew in my heart instead of what fear made me see. Forgive me, please. Forgive me for doubting you even for a moment." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "There is nothing to forgive. You had every reason to doubt. You barely know me. Why should you trust? Because I love you." The words came out fierce and certain, leaving no room for doubt. "I love you, Bethany Moore. Not your station, not your dowry, not what society thinks you should be. I love the woman who taught me that hearts can heal, who showed me that beauty is found in dirt and flowers and honest conversation, who made me want to live again instead of just existing." He reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I love you, and I am so sorry I let you believe even for a moment that I did not." Bethany's breath caught. "Matthew." She leaned into his touch, her own hands coming up to cover his. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me. So much I cannot imagine my life without you in it." "Then do not imagine it." He leaned forward until their foreheads touched, breathing the same air, existing in the same space. "Be with me, not as a secret, not as something to hide. Be with me openly, proudly. Let me claim you in front of everyone who said it was impossible. But your duty, your title, what will people say? Let them say whatever they want." His voice was steady with conviction. "I spent 6 years living for duty, living for what other people expected, and I was miserable, empty, half alive. Then I found you, and suddenly duty seems like the smallest thing in the world compared to this, compared to us." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Marry me, Bethany. Not because you have no other choice, not because I am a duke who can save you from an unwanted marriage. Marry me because you love me, because I love you, because what we have is real and precious and worth fighting for." Bethany's tears were falling faster now, but they were different tears, not grief, not despair. Something closer to joy, mixed with disbelief, mixed with desperate hope. "Yes," the word came out choked but clear. "Yes, I will marry you. Yes to all of it." Matthew closed the distance between them and kissed her. Finally, properly. The way he had wanted to since that first night in the garden when she had taught him about lavender and waiting and beautiful sad things. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid this moment might shatter like all the others. But then Bethany's hands slid into his hair and Matthew's arms wrapped around her waist, and the kiss deepened into something hungry and desperate and achingly real. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, hands clutching at each other, as if letting go might mean losing this forever. "I will not let anyone take you from me again." Matthew's voice was fierce against her lips. "Not your aunt, not Lady Margaret, not society, not anyone. You are mine, and I am yours, and that is the only truth that matters." Bethany nodded, unable to speak past the emotion flooding through her. She had gone from despair to joy so quickly she felt dizzy with it. But Matthew's arms were solid around her, and his heart was beating against hers, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely, utterly safe. They stayed there in the garden as the moon tracked across the sky, holding each other, stealing kisses between whispered promises and plans for a future they would build together. And when they finally walked back to the manor hand in hand, ready to face whatever scandal waited for them, they were no longer the grieving duke and the invisible girl. They were simply two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen love over everything else. Two people who had learned that the most valuable things in life are the ones worth risking everything to keep. When Matthew and Bethany returned to the manor hand in hand, the ballroom had emptied of most guests. Only a few remained, drawn by scandal like moths to flame, eager to witness whatever drama would unfold next. Lady Eleanor stood near the entrance, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. Lady Margaret sat in a corner, her earlier triumph replaced by something closer to panic, as she watched the Duke enter with Bethany at his side, their fingers intertwined, their connection undeniable. "Your Grace." Lady Eleanor's voice was ice. "I trust you have come to your senses regarding this unfortunate situation." Matthew stopped in the center of the room, Bethany beside him, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The only unfortunate situation here, Lady Eleanor, is the way you have treated your niece, locking her away, forcing her into an unwanted marriage, speaking of her as if she were a burden rather than a blessing." Lady Eleanor's face flushed with anger and humiliation. "I have done my duty by her, fed her, clothed her, given her a home when she had nothing. You gave her a cage." Matthew's tone was cutting. "And you convinced her she should be grateful for it." He turned to face the remaining guests, ensuring his words would be heard and repeated in every drawing room in England by morning. "Let me make something perfectly clear. Miss Bethany Moore has agreed to become my wife, my Duchess, and anyone who shows her anything less than the respect that position demands will answer to me personally." The room erupted in shocked whispers. This was more than scandal. This was revolution. A duke choosing a nobody over every eligible woman in society. Lady Margaret rose from her seat, desperation making her reckless. "Your Grace, surely you cannot mean this. She tricked you. I showed you the letter. She is manipulating you." "No." Matthew's voice was deadly quiet. "You showed me a forgery. A letter you paid a housemaid to steal and then altered to suit your purposes. I have the real letter. I have the housemaid's testimony. And I have more than enough evidence to ruin you completely if you do not leave this house immediately and never speak my name or Bethany's again." Lady Margaret went white. "You cannot prove. Try me." Matthew took a step toward her, and something in his expression made her falter. "I am a duke, Lady Margaret. I have resources you cannot imagine, connections you cannot match. If I want to destroy your reputation, your prospects, your entire future, I can do it before breakfast tomorrow. The only question is whether you are foolish enough to make me want to." The threat hung in the air, clear and unmistakable. Lady Margaret looked around the room, seeking support, but found only averted eyes and uncomfortable silence. No one wanted to be associated with her now. No one wanted to risk the Duke's wrath by taking her side. She gathered what remained of her dignity and walked toward the door, her head high, but her hands shaking. As she passed Bethany, she paused for just a moment. "You do not deserve him." The words were quiet, bitter, meant only for Bethany's ears. But Bethany, who had spent her entire life being told what she did not deserve, simply looked at Lady Margaret with something close to pity. "Perhaps not, but he chose me anyway, and that is what you cannot forgive." Lady Margaret left without another word, and the door closing behind her felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Lady Eleanor tried one last time to salvage control. "Your Grace, I must protest. This marriage is highly irregular. The girl has no dowry, no proper family connections. People will talk. Let them talk." Matthew's tone made it clear the discussion was over. "And if you wish to maintain any relationship with your niece after she becomes my Duchess, I suggest you adjust your attitude considerably. Otherwise, you will find yourself without an invitation to the wedding, or to any event held at Wetherby Estate for the foreseeable future." The threat was clear. Cross him, and lose all the social standing that came with being connected to a duke. Lady Eleanor's mouth thinned into a hard line, but she nodded stiffly. "As you wish, Your Grace." Matthew turned back to Bethany, his expression softening immediately. Come, let us leave this place. You do not have to spend another night under this roof. But my things, I will have them sent to you. Right now, I want you somewhere safe. Somewhere you will never again have to fear being locked away or sold to the highest bidder. He led her toward the door, past the staring guests, past the servants who watched with wide eyes, past Lady Eleanor, who stood rigid with defeat. Outside, Matthew's carriage waited. He handed Bethany inside with careful courtesy, then climbed in beside her. As the carriage rolled away from Blackwell Manor, Bethany looked back one last time at the house that had been her prison for so many years. She felt nothing. No sadness, no nostalgia, just relief that she was leaving and never had to return. Matthew took her hand, drawing her attention back to him. "Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am free." She squeezed his fingers, still half afraid this was a dream. "Where are we going?" "To my estate. You will stay there as my guest, properly chaperoned, of course, until we can arrange the wedding, which will be as soon as I can obtain a license and plan a ceremony worthy of you." Bethany laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "I do not need a grand ceremony, Matthew. I only need you. Then you shall have me." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed each knuckle slowly, deliberately, for the rest of our lives. Through every scandal, through every whispered rumor, through every person who thinks we made a mistake, you will have me, and you will have me. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling his arm come around her to hold her close. Always. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of the carriage soothing, the closeness between them everything they needed. But as they drew closer to Wetherby Estate, Matthew spoke again, his voice quiet but intense. "Bethany, yes. I want you to know something. When we marry, it will not be in name only. I am not asking you to be my duchess in title while I keep you at a distance. I want a real marriage, in every sense. I want to share your bed and your life and every moment I possibly can. Is that what you want as well?" Bethany lifted her head to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his question, the fear that perhaps she was not ready, that perhaps she needed more time, but she had been waiting her entire life for someone to see her, to love her, to choose her. She was not about to waste another moment. "Yes." Her voice was steady with certainty. "That is exactly what I want." Matthew's eyes darkened with desire mixed with tenderness. "Then tonight, if you wish it, we can begin our forever. Not as Duke and Duchess, just as Matthew and Bethany, two people who found each other against all odds and refused to let go." Bethany's heart was racing, but not with fear, with anticipation, with want, with love so overwhelming it felt like drowning and flying all at once. "Tonight," she agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that lasted until the carriage rolled through the gates of Wetherby Estate and stopped before a manor that would soon become her home. Their home, where they would build a life based on love instead of duty, on choice instead of obligation, on truth instead of pretense, where two broken people would make each other whole again, one kiss at a time, one touch at a time, one moment of honest connection at a time. Starting tonight. Wetherby Estate was everything Blackwell Manor was not. Where Lady Eleanor's house had been cold and imposing, Matthew's home felt warm despite its size. Where Bethany had been invisible among strangers, here she was welcomed by staff who smiled genuinely and treated her with respect that had nothing to do with fear. Matthew led her through corridors lit by soft lamplight until they reached a suite of rooms that took her breath away. Large windows overlooked gardens that stretched toward hills painted silver by moonlight, furniture that looked comfortable rather than just expensive, books stacked on tables as if someone actually read them. "This will be yours until the wedding." Matthew's voice was gentle. "After that you will share my rooms, if that is still what you want." Bethany turned to face him, seeing the question in his eyes, the fear that perhaps she had changed her mind, that perhaps the reality of what they were doing had made her reconsider. She crossed the space between them and took his hands in hers. "I have never wanted anything more in my entire life." Relief and desire flickered across his face in equal measure. "Are you certain? We can wait. I do not want you to feel pressured or rushed. We have time. But Bethany shook her head. I have spent my entire life waiting, Matthew. Waiting to be seen, waiting to matter, waiting for something real. I do not want to wait anymore. She reached up and began unpinning her hair, letting it fall in waves around her shoulders. Matthew watched her with an intensity that made her skin feel warm, made her aware of every breath, every heartbeat. Show me. Her voice was steady despite the nervousness fluttering in her stomach. Show me what it means to be loved by you, not as a duke loves a duchess, as Matthew loves Bethany. He stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with such tenderness it made her eyes sting with tears. I will spend the rest of my life showing you, but we can start tonight. He kissed her slowly, deeply, his hands sliding into her hair as hers moved to the buttons of his shirt. There was no rush, no desperation, just two people learning each other through touch and breath and whispered words. Matthew's fingers found the laces of her gown, loosening them with patient care. The fabric slipped from her shoulders and pooled at her feet, leaving her in only her thin chemise. She should have felt vulnerable, exposed, but the way he looked at her, with reverence and desire and love all mixed together, made her feel beautiful instead. You are perfect. His voice was rough with emotion. Every part of you, exactly as you are. Bethany's hands trembled slightly as she pushed his shirt from his shoulders, revealing skin she had never seen before. He was beautiful too, all lean muscle and warm flesh marked here and there with small scars that told stories of a life lived. She traced one scar along his ribs with gentle fingers. What happened here? Fell from a horse when I was 15. Thought I was invincible. He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. Learned I was not. We are none of us invincible. She looked up at him through her lashes. But perhaps together we can be brave. Together, he agreed, and lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. He carried her to the bed and laid her down with such care she felt cherished in a way she had never experienced. He settled beside her, propped on one elbow, his free hand tracing patterns on her skin through the thin fabric of her chemise. If at any point you want to stop, we stop. His eyes were serious, making sure she understood. Your comfort matters more than anything else. But Bethany pulled him down into a kiss that left no doubt about what she wanted. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she whispered against his lips, I trust you completely. What followed was a slow exploration of sensation and connection. Matthew's hands moved across her skin with reverence, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch, what made her breath catch, and her fingers dig into his shoulders. He removed her chemise with careful patience, his eyes drinking in every inch of skin revealed. When she reached for him, he let her explore too, let her learn the planes and angles of his body, let her discover that touching him brought her as much pleasure as being touched. They came together slowly, carefully, Matthew watching her face for any sign of discomfort. There was a moment of pressure, of adjustment, but then he was inside her, and they were connected in the most intimate way possible, and Bethany felt tears slip from her eyes, because it was perfect, he was perfect. This was everything she had never dared to dream. Are you all right? Matthew's voice shook with restraint, his whole body tense with the effort of staying still. Yes, more than all right. She wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer. Move, please. I want to feel all of it. He began to move then, slow and careful, building a rhythm that had them both gasping. Bethany met him movement for movement, learning quickly, her body responding to his in ways that felt instinctive and right. The pleasure built like a wave higher and higher, until Bethany shattered with a cry that Matthew caught with his mouth over hers. He followed moments later, her name on his lips like a prayer, like a benediction, like the answer to every question he had ever asked. They lay tangled together afterward, skin cooling, hearts gradually slowing, both too overwhelmed to speak. Matthew pulled the blankets around them and gathered Bethany close against his chest, his hand stroking through her hair. I love you. His voice was thick with emotion. I will never tire of saying that. I will never tire of showing you. I love you too. Bethany pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, I will choose you every day for the rest of our lives." They drifted into sleep like that, wrapped around each other, safe and warm and completely content. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the garden at Wetherby Estate, not in the lavender fields where they had first found each other, though those would always be sacred to them. Instead, in a rose garden that Matthew's late wife had planted but never seen bloom. It felt right somehow, honoring the past while embracing the future, acknowledging that love could exist more than once, that hearts could heal without forgetting. Bethany wore a simple gown of ivory lace, decorated with sprigs of fresh lavender woven into her hair. Matthew wore a suit the color of storm clouds, matching his eyes, which had not left her face since she appeared at the end of the garden path. The ceremony was small. Close friends, Matthew's family, even Lady Eleanor attended, though she sat stiff and silent throughout, unable to fully accept what her niece had become, but unwilling to lose the connection to a duke. When Matthew spoke his vows, his voice carried across the garden clear and strong. "I vow to see you every day, to choose you every day, to love you not in spite of who you are, but because of it. You taught me that hearts can heal. You gave me a reason to live instead of just exist, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to give you even a fraction of what you have given me." Bethany's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. "I vow to stand beside you, to share your burdens and your joys, to remind you that you are more than your title, more than your duty, more than what society expects. You are Matthew, and that is everything I need." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Matthew kissed her with all the love and passion and promise that burned between them, the garden seemed to hold its breath in perfect stillness. Then the world exhaled, and everyone cheered, and Matthew and Bethany walked back up the path hand in hand, the Duke of Wetherby and his Duchess, the man who chose love, and the woman who taught him how. The celebration lasted until sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. As the last guests departed and the stars began to appear, Matthew took Bethany's hand and led her to the lavender garden they had claimed as their own. "Do you remember the first night we spoke here?" He pulled her close, swaying gently as if to music only they could hear. "You told me that lavender means I will wait for you. I remember." Bethany rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I remember everything. I am glad we did not have to wait long. That we found each other when we did. That we chose to be brave enough to reach for something real. So am I." They stood like that as darkness fell completely, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the scent of lavender and the promise of forever. Above them, stars wheeled across the vast sky, indifferent to human concerns but bearing witness nonetheless to this small miracle. Two people who should never have met, who should never have loved, who should never have been allowed to choose each other, but did anyway, and in choosing created something beautiful, something lasting, something that would echo through their lives and the lives of children not yet born and the gardens they would plant together in years to come. The garden that had once been Bethany's refuge from loneliness had become their shared sanctuary. The place where an invisible girl and a grieving duke had found each other in the darkness and decided that love was worth the risk, worth the scandal, worth everything. And as Matthew and Bethany walked back to their home, to the life they would build together one day at a time, the lavender swayed in the evening breeze, keeping their secrets, holding their memories, bearing witness to a love that had overcome every obstacle society placed in its path, a love that would last as long as the flowers bloomed, forever. Bethany Moore arrived at Blackwell Manor as the invisible girl no one wanted to see. She left as a duchess who had learned that true worth cannot be measured by dowries or titles, but by the courage to love honestly when the world demands pretense. Matthew Ashford returned to England, believing his heart had died with his first wife. He discovered instead that hearts do not die. They simply wait for the right person to remind them how to beat again. Their story was not about a duke rescuing a poor girl. It was about two broken people choosing to heal each other, about finding beauty in unexpected places, about refusing to let society define what love is allowed to look like. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is not fighting dragons or conquering kingdoms. Sometimes it is simply choosing to feel when everything tells you to stay numb. choosing to hope when despair seems safer, choosing to love when fear demands you protect yourself. Bethany and Matthew chose love, and in that choice, they found something more valuable than all the wealth and titles in England. They found each other, they found themselves, they found home. What about you? When have you chosen courage over safety? When have you reached for something real, even when it terrified you? When have you decided that love, in whatever form it takes, is worth the risk? If this story touched your heart, please leave a like to help others find it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about love that defies expectations. And comment below to let me know where in the world you are listening from. I love knowing that these stories connect us across distance and time. Thank you for spending this time with Matthew and Bethany. May you always have the courage to choose love. May you always remember that you are worthy of being seen. And may you find your own lavender garden, where impossible dreams become beautiful reality. Until the next story, dear listener. Until the next journey we take together.